Now let's look at solving system of linear equations. And when we solve system of linear equations algebraically, there's actually two different methods. In this video we're going to talk about substitution method, and in the following video we'll talk about using a different method called elimination. So let's start with an example, and let's start with 3x plus 2y is equal to 5. 4x minus y is equal to 14. Well, if we think about the steps of the substitution method, the very first step is we're going to solve one equation for one variable. Now, it actually doesn't matter which equation we start with, but there's a hint here that's important. That is that this is going to be much easier if we start with a variable with a coefficient of 1 or minus 1. Otherwise, you'll end up with fractions. So if you end up with some fractions, you might want to stop and ask yourself if you can start over and start with a variable with a coefficient of 1 or minus 1. So solve for a variable with a coefficient of 1 or minus 1. And let's look at coefficients. In this 3x here, the coefficient is 3. In 2y, it's 2. 4x, it's 4. And in minus y, it's minus 1. So the coefficient is just the number in front of the variable. So in step number 1, what we're going to do is I'm going to solve for this y right here because it has a coefficient of minus 1. So you have 4x minus y is equal to 14. I'm going to subtract 4x and subtract 4x. And I get minus y is minus 4x plus 14. That's a minus y, but I want a positive y, so I'm going to multiply everything by minus 1 or divide everything by minus 1, whatever makes more sense to you. It's the same thing, so it's y is equal to 4x minus 14. And that's your answer to step number 1. Now, step number 2 is you're going to plug in the answer from step number 1. And you're going to plug it into the other equation. And I stress other. The key here is that since we have two equations, we have to use both of them. So since in the first equation we used 4x minus y is 14, in the next step we have to use the other equation. So as the first thing I do with step number 2 is I write down the other equation. 3x plus 2y is equal to 5. I want to plug in y. So where the y is, I'm going to put a parentheses, leave a space, and then I'm going to plug in my answer for y there. So that's 4x minus 14. And then I'm simply going to solve. If you notice, there's only one variable here, the x. So you distribute the 2, and you get 3x plus 8x minus 14 is 5. It's 11x minus 14 is equal to 5. Oh, actually, that's not right. 2 times 4 is 8, but 2 times 14 is 28. So you have to be real careful with your distributing. 2 times 14, right? And then I'm going to add 28 and add 28. And I get 11x is 28, 33. So x is 3. Now this is part of my final answer. Now the third step, right, so the first step was to solve for one variable in one equation. My second step is to plug that into the other equation and solve, and this is part of my final answer. So now I still need to solve for y. So what I need to do now is I need to plug in the answer from step number 2. And it turns out it doesn't matter where you plug this in. You can plug it into either one of the original equations or into the end of the step number 1, whichever one makes more sense to you. typically plug it into one of the original equations. It doesn't matter which one, so I say either equation. And let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to use the first equation here. So I use 3x plus 2y is 5. I'm going to plug in x equals 3. Right? That was my answer there. X equals 3. So I go 3 times 3 plus 2y is 5. And all I do is I just solve. So that's 9 plus 2y is 5. And then I'm going to subtract 9 and subtract 9, and I get 2y is minus 4. Divide by 2, and I get y is minus 2. And that's the other part of my final answer. So from step number 2, I have that x is equal to 3. Step number 3, I have y equals 2, so my final answer is x is equal to 3, y is equal to minus 2. Typically we write it the x first, and then the y, and there's your answer right there, 3, 2. Let's just do another example. So here we have x minus 3y is minus 13. 3x plus y is equal to 11. Step number 1. If you want to look at the steps again, the first step is to solve for one variable in one equation. Choose one with a coefficient of 1 or minus 1. This has a coefficient of 1, minus 3, 3, and 1. It doesn't matter if I choose this x or this y. You can choose either one. I'm going to choose the first one. So I get x minus 3y is minus 13. And I'm going to choose for x. I'm going to solve for x, so I add 3y to both sides. And I get x is equal to 3y minus 13. Step number 2 is I take this answer and I plug it into the other equation. Now it's very important that I use the equation I did not use the first time, so I used the first equation. So now I'm going to use the second equation, so I go 3x plus y is 11. Where the x is, I'm going to plug in 3y minus 13. So it's 3 times 3y minus 13 plus y is equal to 11. And now I just solve. So I just distribute. So that's minus, let's see, that's 3y, so that's 9y minus 39 plus y is equal to 11. The 9y and the 9y's, that's 10y minus 39 is equal to 11. I'm going to add 39 to both sides, and I give 10y is equal to, that's 30, 40, 50. Y is equal to 5. And that's the end of step 2, and that's part of my final answer. So let's see what the next step is. Step number 1 was solve one equation for one variable. We did that. Second step is plug the answer from step number 1 into the other equation to solve. So now we're going to take the next equation. What's step number 3? Step number 3 is you plug in answer from step number 2 into any equation or either equation. So let's do that. I'm going to choose the first equation here. That's step 3. So you get x minus 3y is equal to minus 13. Y is 5, so you get x minus 3 times 5 minus 13. That's x minus 15 is equal to minus 13. Add 15 to both sides, and you get x is equal to 2. So your final answer is x is 2, y is 5. That's the answer, right? And the steps again, going to write down the steps. Here are the steps. Solve for one equation for one variable. Choose a variable with a coefficient of 1 or minus 1. Plug in the answer from step number 2 into the other equation. It's got to be the other equation. And step number 3, plug that answer into either equation and simply solve, and that's your answers. Now, how will you check your work? Let's check it, right? So our original problem is x minus 3y is equal to minus 13. 3x plus y is equal to 11, and we want to check to see if our answer is correct. Well, here's the key rule. The key rule is it must check for both equations. If it works for one and doesn't check for the other, then it's not the solution. So you have to plug it in for both equations. So the first thing we do is we go x minus 3y is minus 13. Plug in x equals 2, and y is equal to 3. That's 2 minus 15 is minus 13. Minus 13 is equal to minus 13. So that checks. But then we have to check it for the other equation as well. So you have 3x plus y is equal to 11. Let's plug in 2 5. So that's 3 times 2 plus 5 is 11. So that's 6 plus 5 is 11. 6 plus 5 is 11, so that is your answer. So you know your answer is correct. And that's how you solve a system of linear equations using substitution method. And the next video is on how to solve it using elimination method.